This is Mary Beth Wade, and I'm sitting with my father today, Tom Wade. And it is March 15th, 2013. And we're just going to try to go through a little bit of family history and his growing up today, and we'll see. So, can you tell us your name, your full name?
Thomas Walter Wade.
Thomas Walter Wade. And what day were you born? What date?
May 27, 1937.
37. Okay. And your birthplace?
Washington, Long Island.
Tell me your parents' full names.
William Thomas Wade, Sr. and Mary Ellen McHugh.
Mary Ellen McHugh. Okay. How do you spell McHugh?
MCHUGH.
H-U-G-H. Okay, I didn't have that right all these years. And you don't have their birth dates, is that right? We would look those up later.
I could probably get them.
Okay. And where were they born?
Ireland.
Ireland. And do you know when they came over roughly? Was it before 1900?
My father came over around, I think, 1906, and my mother around 1913.
Okay, we have those dates elsewhere, so we'll get that
I'm pretty sure.
inserted. Mike even has it on from the record of your father's ship and that sort of thing.
I had that upstairs. But
Yeah. And who were your siblings?
Eileen, Anna, Helen, William, John,
Okay, and what did Eileen go by, really?
Pat.
Yeah, that's my godmother. Yeah, Pat. Okay. Who, is that the order?
No,
Okay.
Anna was first, then
And-
Pat, Helen, Bill, John.
And you're the baby?
I'm the baby.
You're the baby. Okay, well, we're going to leave those details aside about when they may have come and everything, but can you tell me a little bit about each of your parents' personalities?
My mother was a very fiery, take charge lady.
Yeah? How do you know? What's an example?
Well, she was just that way. I mean, she was very definitive. My father was a very strong, passive man, unless you got him upset.
Yeah.
But he was very, very passive, and he complimented her well.
Okay. So give me an example of how he was passive and she was fiery. Like, what makes you say that? Did she run the house a certain way? Did she?
Yes, she was pretty well the boss. I'm sure he knew what was going on, or she knew what he wanted in a way, I'm sure, but she was the boss. I mean, she would tell you what was going to be in a lot of ways, and he did not do that.
Okay. What would a typical morning be like?
Well, he'd be up at 5:30 eating his breakfast pretty well. She cooked breakfast for every member of the family, and he'd be up at 5:30 ready to go to work.
Okay.
By 6:30, and then the others would come down. I think Pat was next, and then Helen, and then I don't recall my brothers too much going to school. Even though I was a little bit behind them. In a way, but I don't remember that I'd come down last and I'd be served breakfast in the dining room like the others were.
Served breakfast.
Served breakfast.
So grandma was sort of making it hot breakfast every morning?
Yeah, bacon, eggs, home fries, fresh Italian bread.
Every morning?
Every morning.
Okay. And she'd been doing it since 5:30 and you'd go off to school at what, 7:30? Something like that maybe?
Well, I could go at 6 o'clock if I was serving mass. I'd say 6:30, serve 6:30 mass, come back home, and then I'd have my breakfast and then she'd send me to school.
Wow.
If it was later, she'd send me to school with bacon and egg sandwiches and coffee.
Okay. Coffee. How young were you drinking coffee, would you say?
I drank tea first.
Yeah.
And then I switched to coffee because Pat drank coffee.
Yeah, because I remember your mother's tea.
Yes, all the children loved her tea.
Yes.
Full of sugar.
It was full of sugar. We love Grandma Wade's tea. And what, you just can't picture your dad in the morning then because he left. He was at work.
Yeah, you didn't see him. He'd come home like 3:30 in the afternoon.
Okay, so what did he do?
Well, he came to America to work on his aunt's farm in Saints Point. Then he worked on the States for several years as a caretaker.
What do you mean by an estate? My kids are into Downton Abbey right now, so
These would be
was it fancy
These
homes?
would be very wealthy people, which would have large homes, and in some cases, my parents lived on the estates too, had their own house, and in the wintertime, one of them they used to go and live in the big house, what they called the big house, on the Holmes estate, and then then they bought their first house just outside of Sands Point, and they called it Hicksville, not Hicksville, Long Island. It was Hicksville because of the Italian, Irish, and Polish immigrants' first property. Then they moved up, they bought a home up in the village and rented it for 3 years.
While they continued to live on the estate or in that first house?
On the first house. And then in the middle of, I would say in the mid to late 30s, the recession had hit in the early 30s. And my father worked on the estates, I'd say, till 35 or so. And then they started to close down and lay off people. So he went to work in the sandbanks as a carpenter. And then he went to work in the sanitation department for a number of years. And then his last years, he was the caretaker of a park. And he got that job because when he was working on one of these estates, he worked with a man by the name of Hulse, Bill Hulse. His father was the superintendent of the estate. These estates could have 250 people working on them.
Wow.
And they provided the people with health care.
Really?
Yeah. And so this senator, this Bill Hulse, the son, became a state senator. And he became a state senator. I remember my father going to see him to get this job taking care of the park. And he got the job. And then he took care of that job until he was like 83 years old. I believe he worked till a month before he died. My sister said a year. So I don't know which is true. And,
but well into his 80s.
Oh, yeah. And we were Republicans. And, you know, because all the jobs beginning, like at the sanitation department through the park, you got the jobs because you were a Republican.
Wow.
And they used to call on election night to say, so-and-so hasn't been here yet, are they coming to vote?
Including the children,
Including
like
the children.
Helen, and when they were old enough.
Yeah, saying, like, well, are they going to be here? And we'd say, yes, they're going to be there, they're working. So it was interesting.
Yeah. So he really worked on the estates till about 1935, you'd say?
I would say so, probably 35. I was born in 37. I can remember him being unemployed when I was old enough to know.
Mm-hmm.
So he might have been there till after I was born.
Okay.
Yeah.
But your older siblings would probably have memories of the years.
Yeah, they would.
Did they
Well,
any of them remember living on the estate?
My 3 sisters were born on the Holmes estate.
On the Holmes estate. Do you remember the other family names they worked for? I feel like you said the
the
Kellys.
Guggenheims.
Guggenheims?
Hitchcocks. Guggenheim.
Okay.
Guggenheim.
Guggenheim.
Cuggenheim.
Oh, so like the museum?
Yeah.
The Guggenheim.
It's those people.
Oh my
Probably,
goodness.
it's almost a wedding.
Yeah.
They come out from New York
Yeah.
in the summer. Or on a weekend maybe, but mostly this summer they close the houses up in the winter.
What did the staff do when they closed up? They moved in the big house?
I don't know what the staff did, but they must have been taken care of because they were all taken care of.
Yeah.
And they worked for Hitchcock, which was another famous name. And yeah, Guggenheim.
I feel like you mentioned the Rothschilds at one point, that you got clothes from the Rothschilds.
My mother came to America to work for Lady Rothschild in New York City, the jewelry. They were the international banking firm and jewelry. And the ring you have is probably a ring that my mother got through that woman when they got married.
Wow.
And my mother came to America, she was only 16. And we saw where she came from, and I don't know how she ever got to a boat. And she was told when she got to America, only talk to the men in blue, meaning policemen.
Mm-hmm.
And so she went to work there for the Rothschild family. And when you talk about clothes, we used to be given clothes, hand-me-downs from the owners, from the children's stuff. We'd go to school in Lord & Taylor clothes, brand new. You know, shirts, sweaters, beautiful clothes. And my father's cousin, Jack Wade, worked in Great Neck on another estate. He was a chauffeur for the family.
My kids will love that. Their
Yeah.
favorite character on Downton Abbey is chauffeur.
And he was a chauffeur for years, and you know, we used to visit them quite frequently over at their house. And they had 6 children too.
Okay.
And later on, when I was in high school, I worked for one of his sons. He was a carpenter. And I worked for him for a short time as an assistant, like helping labor help.
Now I get the house projects.
So, and then my father was a very good landscaper. When he came over to America, he was coming from Ireland. He was a farmer, and he worked on his aunt's farm. He came to work on the farm with his aunt because her husband died, and he died young. And she had a son, which was pretty close to my father's age, George, Dean.
Dean.
And
Dean's the last name.
right, and there was a Walter Dean, who I'm named after, by middle name. He was a Long Island policeman who was killed going home from work
Oh.
in a car accident.
Oh.
And they were all buried opposite St. Mary's Church. Remember?
Yeah. We went and saw.
They were Episcopalian, which my father was. My father came to America as Episcopalian.
Right.
And then he met my mother in New York City. They would go into on weekends from the farms to socialize.
Mm-hmm.
And he met my mother there. And then he married, and she didn't know. He became a Catholic.
When did he become a Catholic? After they married?
No, before.
Okay.
She didn't know it.
When she was dating him?
Yeah.
And she didn't know he converted, you mean?
No, he was studying and stuff like that, so then he converted.
So he secretly studied to become Catholic and then proposed.
Yeah.
That's really something. Yeah.
So, and then down in Sands Point, there's an area where on Saturday nights, all the people from the estates, and I think this is, my mother, I don't know if my mother was working down here. I don't know if she came eventually to work down there or not. But they used to meet like in the field for dancing. And I know where the spot is.
Really?
Down there, yeah. So,
Really?
and I know several of the estates they worked on.
Yes, we drove through some.
Yeah.
I would love to do that sometime with the camera.
Yeah.
Get some sense
Well, it's
of.
changed.
I know,
It's
yeah.
changed a great deal today. It's been broken up a lot.
Yeah.
And,
There's no big houses.
Oh,
Well, the
yeah.
houses last, but they're not like the
Yeah.
little places around them aren't theirs
And they don't
anymore.
have the properties.
Right.
They don't have the properties they had.
Okay. So, what was family life like then? So, we don't know before you're born, but in your early years, your school
Well,
years.
first of all, I was born at home on the
Ah.
dining room table. Oh, no, not the dining room table. My brother John was having his first communion that day
Ah.
on a Sunday. And he came home, he thought it was a cat in the crying, making noise.
In the little cradle or the basket.
basket.
Uh-huh.
And it was me. And so
Born at home. Were all her children born at home?
I believe so. Because there were actually at that point in time, there were no hospitals in Long Island.
Wow.
Yeah.
So when you say the estates took care of their health care, you mean just bringing in a doctor?
Bringing doctors around, you go to a doctor, but there was no hospital. You had to go into, like Mom had her appendix out as a 3-year-old, and she had to go from Great Neck into Flushing.
Wow.
And then the first hospital built in Long Island, I was a little boy, used to listen to the radio with my mother in the morning, Tex and Jinx McCrary, they were radio personalities, and they helped build a hospital in Manhasset, literally, called North Shore Community Hospital, which is now a big hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And a very comprehensive, takes in I think it's now North Shore Long Island Jewish Hospital. They encompass now several hospitals all over the island.
Okay.
And Mom, as a girl in high school, helped raise money for it.
Really?
Yeah,
To start it.
to start it.
That-
And so that, but I was little, and so
well, that's what I was just going to ask. Johnny, then, if he had his first communion when you were born,
He's
is he the
7 years
next older?
he's 7 years older.
So
than
you were really the baby by a
I
lot.
was.
And
Yeah.
so were you and your mom close?
Yeah. She was close to everybody.
Yeah?
She was very close to Johnny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what did you like to do with your mom? Like you said, you listened to the radio in the morning.
Oh, that would just be you were there.
You hung out.
And you listen. Then you'd come home in the afternoons from school. And then you'd have a snack, tea, fresh Italian bread again, or whatever. And then you'd listen to the radio shows. I would listen to the radio. She'd listen to earlier today. She'd listen to an Irish show from New York City. Terry so-and-so, was it Terry Long? I don't know. But then Kate Smith was very popular. Like when we first, that was before, we listened to radio in the afternoon when I came home from school, all the kids shows like Sky King and stuff.
Okay.
And later on when we had TV, she'd watch Kate Smith and then I'd watch the cowboy shows or whatever. And, but I was,
She wasn't one, though, when he got home to give you a big hug or kiss you or say, oh, Tommy. Was she a hugger?
yeah, she was, but not overly, so to speak, I don't think.
Because you are, so I wonder.
Yeah, she was, but she wasn't that much. And so then the interesting thing was we sat down to dinner every night, 8 people, full course dinner.
What does that mean, full course dinner?
Well, you got a roast,
Meat,
not a
potato.
meat, potatoes,
Bread,
cereal. I mean not cereal, but
veggies,
vegetables.
salad.
Not salad so much. They weren't big on that.
Mm-hmm.
And then dessert. Right?
Every night.
Every night. Aunt Helen, who worked in New York City, right after World War II, she was working in the city. She'd come home every night with 2 choices of desserts.
2 choices. And you mean like pastry or cake? Or...
Cakes and pies.
Cheese. Mm-hmm. Interesting. What about your dad? Did you feel close to him?
Yeah, he was. I used to walk on Sundays with him to the town dock from where we lived. And then in the wintertime we'd ride, but and sometimes I'd catch with him.
Mm-hmm.
And then I observed him doing the landscaping, and I followed on that a lot. I did a lot of work as I got older around the yard.
Learning from him.
Yeah, watching him stuff and then doing it myself.
Mm-hmm.
And then the year when I got older, I planted when I was in, I think it was college. I had to plant the whole new yard grass, and I did that.
Mm-hmm.
And then the summer before I came up to Maris to work, I painted the whole house outside. And
Wow.
So I did a lot of work around the house. My brothers did. My brothers were car buffs. And,
Car buffs.
yeah, they played ball, but I really played ball.
That's what I was going to ask next about. How did you get into the sports? It wasn't your big brothers.
Probably saw them as
A little
well,
bit.
but I did it right away.
Mm-hmm.
They said I had a ball and gloves in the crib
Yeah.
and stuff, and we had a big side street. We also used to play.
So you only grew up in South Bayless House?
Yeah.
That side street? I can picture. Okay, go ahead.
And we used to play softball. Very interestingly, there were several girls in the neighborhood who were very good athletes, and we played softball together.
Nice.
They would never know, and they were good.
Yeah.
And then I had basketball. I had a peach basket put up on one of the barns.
Ah.
White songs. Mrs. Kelly, who was another family my mother worked for in New York after the Rothschilds. He was a doctor, and my mother and she became like that. And when I was a kid in grammar school, she'd come out almost like, she then moved out to Port Washington herself, and she'd come almost weekly, it seemed, and take Mom and I out to a ride and lunch and so on and so forth.
Is that right?
Yeah, and then on one of my birthdays, she took me out to buy me a basketball.
Oh.
And she saw how expensive they were, and so she bought me a soccer ball.
Oh.
So I first played basketball with a soccer ball. And I did that, and I was a pitcher. And when I was a little kid, I painted a home plate on one of the barns near the basket.
Out on one of the barns?
Same barn, and there was many barns there. And then I used to pitch from there. I had a little mound made up. And I used to recreate games as a big follow of the Dodgers and stuff like that. So
How'd you follow him on radio?
Yep. Then TV came later in the 40s. I remember the day Jackie Robinson made his debut with the Dodgers. And then on Saturdays, there was a Weinlich family who lived nearby. Mr. Weinlich was elderly, and he worked for Weissong Building Supply, which was across the street from our house.
Mm-hmm.
And he'd invite me over to watch the games on TV.
Nice.
And they had they had sons quite older. My compliment to my brothers and sisters, my sisters. One of whom was a priest, and he used to take me into Brooklyn and stuff and so on to see movies, and then take me to lunch and so on.
Wow.
I think he was cultivating me for the priesthood.
Oh.
So we used to do that.
Interesting. You probably had hopes, right? How often did you serve Mass?
Oh, I served Mass a lot because I was reliable.
Like weekly?
Oh, every Sunday. I mean, during the week I'd serve Mass 6:30 in the morning.
Several times during the week as well. Okay. Okay.
Used to walk a mile and a mile back. Then
So
go to
your
school
story's
a mile.
real. I walked to school. It was real.
Those days there were no bus. I don't think there was a bus when I went to middle school.
Sure.
Because it was a village kind of concept, and so some kids had to really walk far.
Yeah. Did all of your siblings finish school?
Yeah.
They all went through high school.
Yeah. My
Okay.
brothers Billy and John went to Catholic high school, then I went to Catholic high school.
The girls did not.
No, they went to public school.
I didn't know that.
And
What do you think made your mom and dad decide you boys needed
I
Catholic?
think first of all, they probably, because they were girls, they were going to go to work. so to speak. Now my brothers, again, Father Moody, he directed, at that time pushed them all towards Catholic high schools because they wanted priests.
Yeah, so it was more thought they might become priests.
Priests, right.
And girls would become nuns whether they went to Catholic school or not.
Probably.
There's still a shot with the girls.
And so now and then interestingly, my brothers, didn't go to college. And Father Moody again got them very good jobs in New York City.
Is that right?
Billy with a bank, and Johnny with an insurance company. But Billy loved mechanics, so he didn't stay. And Johnny was very bright. And not that Billy wasn't, but Johnny was very bright, and he was with the home insurance company. They wanted to send him to Chicago to school, and he quit. And then he eventually became a truck driver.
Do you think his being really close with your family made him make that? Like, would it have been impossible to move to Chicago in his eyes, or why?
He wouldn't have to move. He'd just go to school for like a couple of weeks.
Oh.
They didn't like studying.
Yeah.
Like Johnny was very bright. It's like when he worked for these trucking companies, they put him in the front office, and after a while he said, "If you don't put me back in the road, I'm going to quit."
I remember you saying that at his funeral.
Then he got a job with Grumman through Ampat, right out of high school, got a job with Grumman Aircraft. And eventually was a secretary to a vice president. And so she got him a job in driving there, and then eventually he became head of the trucking department.
Interesting.
Transportation. So he did that for 17 years.
Interesting.
But he's a piece of work. But he always liked to travel.
Okay.
He'd be on the road for a month all the way across the country. He'd come home and he'd drive all the way up here to see us.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, he was up here a lot as a kid. I remember them being here a lot.
Yeah.
Amazing. So what values do you think, like, you would wish that you could pass on to your grandkids from your parents? Work.
Yeah, all of us worked. There was nobody that didn't work. And you have to realize that the time frame of those days, people, you literally went to work, parents at early in the morning, and they were in bed by, my father would stay up at night reading, but they'd be in bed pretty early, when we were at home. Then later on they changed it. But most people worked. Very few people went to college. That was a privileged thing. Like, I only probably went to college because where I went to high school at St. Mary's in Manhasset, that was a pretty affluent community, and it attracted kids from a variety of places there, but everybody there went to college.
It was like good peer pressure.
Yeah, so it was just like, I just said I'm going to go.
And your parents supported that? They didn't?
Yeah, my mother said one time, she said, "It gets too hard, you can quit and go to work." And
because to them school was really, really hard.
Yeah.
They didn't have an education.
Yeah, my mother, I don't know how much my mother had at all.
Could she read?
Yeah. And my father had, he came here, I think there's a little confusion. I think the stuff, I had thought he came in his early teens. The stuff Mike Cimarelli gave me, found, it seems he was older, maybe 19. But then again, there's some confusion because he was evidently in Port Washington schools. Excuse me. And it was in Main Street School. It was probably the junior high way back. And he was in school, and I don't know, got into a disagreement. He jumped out the window and never went back to school. That was like 6th grade, but he was, as I understood it, but he was older, so I don't know what it was then, how the system worked.
If it was more like a one-room schoolhouse kind of feel?
Well, I don't know what size it was then. It was eventually a pretty big school.
Yeah.
He never went back. And then, he could write. He could write, but not greatly. And
when you say a letter, did they keep in touch with family back home?
Oh yeah, I have stuff upstairs that will be cards where they're writing back and forth.
But not a lot of detail, right? Is that what
No, they'd be very short. And what they were doing too is they were sending money back home for them to live because, they came over here because there was no work there.
Yeah.
My father came really, to work for his aunt because she needed him. But my mother came because there was nothing there. I saw, I was missing a point in there. There was something I want to say.
You said he would write, your dad would read, write.
Oh, my father, as I said, very little schooling, he would read several papers a night, cover to cover. You know, after everybody went to bed, or even before we went to bed, he'd go, and then he'd take him, put him on the dining room table, and he read everything in that paper.
Wow.
You know.
You mean like the New York Times, the Wall Street
Not the Times, it'd be the Wall, the.
Oh yeah, he was Republican.
Times weren't
I know.
working class people. Like, that was not. This was the New York Journal, I think it was, the Tribune, and then the NASA paper, and so on and so forth.
Okay. So the local news and.
Yeah. And the New York's world news, but like not from the Times and so on. They'd be kind of difficult papers for them to read.
Yeah, sure, that makes sense.
So, but that was something I noted that he read profusely. And he was very, very quiet. He didn't talk a lot. And he smoked incessantly. He had a pipe in his mouth all day long.
And lived to 83.
And he held it in his lips, not in his teeth. It was in his lips.
Huh.
And then the other thing I remember about him, on Sundays he'd go to church. He looked like the banker. He'd always have a blue suit, white shirt, tie, and he took the jacket off, but he stayed in his shirt and tie all day Sunday. You know. And another thing about the family style, like as I said, my mother would be cooking from morning till night. On Sundays, I go to mass with them. My brothers and sisters would go later. But we would sit down, my mom and dad, to have breakfast, bacon, eggs, again, fresh Italian bread, coffee. And then by 1 o'clock, you'd have a roast dinner, beef, pork, liver, for everybody.
I remember those roast dinners.
And then on Sunday night, that's when my mother quit after lunch, but Sunday night then, she would bake Irish bread. And then she would have, the roast would be cut, and she would make potato salad.
Wow.
So that was her afternoon off.
Yeah.
And then she would, sit down and she'd relax most of Sunday afternoon. But she too would, every night would sit down with the paper on the sofa and read. But she'd probably pretty well fall asleep because she'd been up since probably 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, I mean, it must have been amazing to be able to serve your family a roast every Sunday and to give these meals, and it must have felt like fantastic, but tremendous work she had to do all that.
Yeah, and they did it, and we didn't have a gas stove until well into the 40s. She'd cook on a coal stove.
Wow.
Which was a full range stove, but by coal. A house was heated by coal.
Right.
And then we also had an ice box. We didn't get a refrigerator, I think, again until the late 40s.
Wow.
And she used to also...
So you remember the icebox?
Oh yeah, and she used to do the laundry in the sink on a washboard. There was no washing machine. And she washed clothes for 8 people. Jeez. And iron.
How did she also work on the estates?
She didn't work on the estates. She probably worked on the estates after the other children were born. But like as a day person, going to and from. But I don't think too much. Because,
I see. So when you were a little boy and Mrs. Kelly was coming for lunch each week, she no longer worked.
No.
They were just friendly.
Yeah, she did work. It was...
Special events.
Yeah. Interesting, I had one time when she was doing work like that on the Hitchcock estate. And I was down there with her as a little boy. And I probably was under 5 years of age.
Yeah.
And I fell asleep outside, beautiful property. And then I woke, didn't know where anybody was. And so I go screaming back to the big house, and I said, I fell off the wall. And they said, you're right? Yeah, I'm okay. But I was just scared because I was lost for the moment. Where is she?
Yeah, and you mean you were actually crying because you were frightened?
I was afraid, yeah.
But you couldn't tell that.
No.
So you had to say, I didn't know where my mom was.
Right.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Or no, you said I fell off a wall. You lied. You didn't say...
I lied. I told her I fell off a wall. Because I didn't want them to think I was scared.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. Okay. Let's see. This is good. What do you tell me about like life in the neighborhood? So you had your family, and you had the brothers and sisters. You tell me a little bit about being on the side road and stuff. But Who, like, were your neighbors a part of your life? Did your parents socialize?
Oh yeah,
Did
people,
they stay home?
everybody in the neighborhood was either Italian, Polish. We even had a couple of black families in our neighborhood, but they were all pretty much Italian, Irish, Polish, and where I lived. And we live
Mostly immigrants,
Oh yeah.
besides the black, or maybe even the black families?
Yeah, blacks might have been here before I know.
Mm-hmm.
But we lived in a great location because, like, as a kid, I could walk to school, I could go get a bus. Later on, I could go get a train, go to New York, or where I wanted to do. I was totally independent. Parents didn't take you necessarily anywhere.
Yeah.
And like say when I
So
was
if you wanted to play sports, you just got yourself there.
Yeah, the only sport you just played on the side street. We went up to the school and played. I didn't play any organized sport until like 6th grade. I played basketball.
I'll be right back. Okay. All right. So sorry, you go up to play basketball.
Right, and nobody in the family would really come. My father would come maybe once or twice during that 3 years I played.
In high school.
Grammar school. High school, they never came.
They never came.
No.
I remember you telling me when you coached with Mr. Davis that the most secure players were the ones whose parents never came. Like, it didn't bother you your parents didn't come?
No, nobody's parents came.
Nobody's parents
They
came.
were working.
Yeah.
They were working. And then when I went to St. Mary's, Johnny and Anna Mae would come after he came back from Korea. They would come and see me play.
Okay.
And then, but in the neighborhood, it was interesting. It was, it was sidewalk streets and whatnot, and you were right part of the village, and not so to speak, you were. And so you'd walk in every day, you'd see the people, you'd talk to them, you'd stop and whatnot.
So you knew Mrs. So-and-so
Yeah.
in the shops or in the houses or both?
Both. No. Yeah, on my way to school later on, I used to stop into the candy store. And Annie Ann worked on Main Street in the market, and I used to stop in this candy store in the morning and in the afternoon, and then I'd meet her, and then she'd take me to the ice cream shop. Then I got home, and my mother would give me another treat. So I was a big fat kid, and
despite all the sports.
despite all this.
Well, if you're eating candy twice a
If I
day.
hadn't played sports, I don't know what I would have been.
Mm-hmm.
I went to high school. I was probably maybe lucky to be 5'4", and I was almost 200 pounds.
Wow.
And then by the time I was a senior, I was 5'7" and 155 pounds. But coming back to the neighborhood, they were all, but everybody was interactive because you in the winter times even too. It wasn't bad winters, and so you really interacted with the neighbors greatly, and I was able to go up and watch as a kid in grammar school. I would watch football practice at the high school and stuff like that. Talk to the coaches and so on. And I remember the football coach. I used to have a catch with him while the team was doing exercises prior to practice. I used to catch him, and he'd say, "I'm wasting my time with you." He said, "You're going to go to parochial school anyway." And so he was a great teacher coach. He taught math, and he taught my sisters all of them.
How did he know you were going to go to
Because
prison?
my brothers and sisters, he knew.
Okay.
And he was a very, very good football and basketball coach. He's an excellent coach.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something else I'm trying to sing about the neighborhood.
Well, I remember a story you would tell about one time you tried to skip mass and go to a movie.
No.
Yeah, and this fella said, I'm gonna call your folks. You need to get back. That's not a story that happened.
No, I don't think so.
I feel like he tried to go somewhere, and he said, I know your parents. You said this is what you would tell us it was like then, and that people looked out for each other.
Oh
Like,
yeah,
people
no,
knew
I
each
don't recall
other.
any stories like that. No,
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't.
Maybe it was not mass. Maybe it was something.
Something
You were supposed to be somewhere else, and someone knew.
Oh yeah,
Tommy, yeah.
Everybody knew you,
Mm-hmm.
and there was no questions.
Okay.
No, there's
That's
none.
just a memory I
There
have.
was even another candy store. Used to stop in the afternoon coming home, halfway between the village and school, and there was people who used to run a candy store outside in front of their house. And this guy Al Jaffe, who his family ran a very successful 5 and dime store in Manhasset, which Mom knows very, very well. And Ken Lent, I wouldn't go into the store because of candy. I would, and so he told my sister, says, he can come in here. You just have to buy candy. And so I used to do that, and
just to visit.
Just to visit.
That's nice.
And another thing I used to do invariably, like during Lent. Lent ended on Saturdays at noon. So you go to Saturday morning mass, and it was a high mass and so forth, and etc. I go in and buy the candy, and I eat it before 12 noon. I hadn't eaten it all Lent. So I get so mad because I hadn't, and then like
it's gone.
11:30, I ate candy. When you look back, it's kind of silly, you know. But that was.
I see. That's sweet. You felt like you broke Lent.
Yeah,
good half hour.
My mother would probably tell me you did.
Yeah, right. Right. Was she very religious?
Oh yeah.
Both of them? So you said work was a major value, but would you say religion's a big value?
Yeah, my mother was very religious. My father was, he was religious, but everything he did was quiet.
Mm-hmm.
He was really quiet, big Irishman. He was a big guy.
Mm-hmm.
He was probably 5'10", 5'11", but really big. He used to, when he'd get a watch band, he would have to get it specially made. It wouldn't fit his wrist.
Huh.
And because they didn't have expansion bands very much in those days. And he'd have to get it made because his hands were his hands would be like that size. They were huge.
Wow.
Really huge. But he just worked all the time.
Wow.
It's like I have a big toe that's big because I dried it. I've given so much.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting.
It's like the way I hold my toe to drive it.
Yeah.
It stretches like it almost makes a turn.
Well, what about your mom's religiosity? Like, did she go to church daily, weekly?
No, they were too busy.
Did they pray? Did she use a rosary?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Those people couldn't do it.
They worked.
They worked all the time. If they weren't out working, they were working in the house.
Yeah.
And those days, they were working in the house. It was cleaning, washing, ironing, shopping. My mother would go to the store every day. We had fresh food every day.
Yeah.
For like dinner and whatnot.
Well, see, this is interesting because I think my kids and I, when we talk about this, wonder what do they need the servants for? Like, how much do you need? And now, when you think back to the times and how much physical labor was involved in getting meals on and keeping a home clean, that was enormous. And washing.
Some of these houses were huge. I mean, they would have. I know later on when I was working with where Auntie Ann was in Main Street Market, I used to go in there and go on deliveries with the man who used to deliver the groceries, Nicky Fasano. And we go to these estates and you go into the kitchens. They'd have 6 to 8 people working in the kitchens, and all kinds of servants throughout. Even then, I'm talking now in the 50s.
Oh.
I mean, these estates still survived, some and different, and they were all very well-known people. The long coast where we were in Port Washington from Great Neck on, Manhasset, Port Washington, Roslyn, Glen Cove, Seaford, etc. They called it the Gold Coast of the North Shore. And it was all wealthy people living on these estates all the way along Long Island Sound. Mm. And to this day, it's still that way. And the big place was the Bayville area, which was really, really big.
Interesting.
Wealth.
Interesting.
Then later as a kid, what I did as a kid, I used to ride right across the street from my house was Weissman's Building Supplies. And they used to deliver building supplies all over. So I used to ride the truck with Stan Dombrowski. And I'd go all day long. I'd go at 8 o'clock in the morning, I'd leave the house.
How old were you? Teenage?
Oh no, I was 8, 10, 12, 8, 10, in that time frame.
You just ride along in a truck all day?
Yep. I'd be gone. And he'd get me lunch or something like that. And he used to just, because I look like a Polak myself, because I had a round face and free-cut hair.
Is that what a Polak looks like?
Yeah, they pretty well did. And there were always stocky people.
Oh, okay.
And seemingly, I'm sure there's not. And he used to call me, he said, it's my son. Stuff. And no, I rode with him all
And you
the
just
time.
talk all day and
Yeah.
help him? Did you help him?
Oh yeah, I delivered building supplies to Bill St. Mary's High School.
Get out of here.
Yeah. I remember taking stuff off, bringing it to school.
And you didn't get paid? You just...
I just rode when I was a kid.
You're fun.
And then those guys, later on my mother had Alzheimer's before it got severe, they knew. They'd catch her walking away from the house and they'd bring her back home.
When you say those guys,
All the guys working on White Sox.
ah,
And then later on, we got bad and he quit, but they knew what was going on, and they used to go down the street and catch her and bring her back.
wow.
Yeah.
But back then it wasn't called us. You didn't know she
Nobody
was.
knew it was.
Yeah, yeah.
Nobody knew what it was. And there was no place, like later on, she had very severe Alzheimer's. And there was no place to take care of her. So like Annie Ann just stopped working and took care of her. And same with she took care of my father and then my brother Billy, who was
Yeah.
So she
Anna was a saint. Good woman. Well, before we go on to like more adult stuff like that, when you grew up some, just one other thing, what would your parents do to entertain themselves? Like, did they dance? Did they play cards? Did they?
Oh, very interestingly, they socialized at home with their fellow immigrants, like especially their Irish compatriots and so on.
So grandma would have them over.
Yeah, have them over, and then they would visit them. And then my mother during the week would go visit the wives of these people and so forth. So it was very much so, very into family. And they'd come like, I remember them coming Christmas Eve, and they'd have a dinner at our house, and they'd play cards. And
I
so,
should have asked about holidays, yeah.
yeah, and they'd play cards. And I can remember one time as a little kid, I was lying on the top of the stairs, listening and observing as they were playing cards,
What did the grown-ups do when I go to bed, kind of thing?
Oh no, I want to know what's going on for Christmas. And then several of them all worked. The men worked like in Catholic institutions as there was a word for them, sacristan, I think, or something like that. They worked taking care of the churches or the schools, cleaning, and so on and so forth.
Sure.
And so one of them, like with my mother's Uncle Mike, who came over later on, he took care of. He was at Chaminade High School in Long Island. And
when you say it wasn't her Uncle Mike, it was your Uncle Mike? It was her brother?
My Uncle Mike was her brother.
Her brother came over.
Yeah.
I don't think I ever knew that Uncle Mike was grandma's.
Yeah.
So she had her brother here for some of her life. Was she didn't have Alzheimer's by then? She knew him?
Oh, no, he was here way back in the 20s.
Oh.
He came over probably not long after she did.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
I kind of always pictured grandma over here with no family at all. So it's nice
No,
for
he
me
was
to know.
here.
And
They didn't see each other that much. I guess they did, because he used to work in the States with my parents. And then he married, and they didn't see them that much then. And but he worked a long time. Even when I was coaching at St. Mary's, he was working at Chaminade High School, which is
sure.
arch rival.
Yeah. So what were holidays like? Lots of people?
Yeah, it was big, family, and we had with 8 people, we always had enough people around anyway.
Yeah, yeah.
And so it was always,
And by the time you were in grammar school, they probably had some boyfriends or girlfriends who came for holidays.
Yeah, I can remember, sure, I can remember, during World War II, I can remember the soldiers coming home from the war. I can remember one guy who, Walter Helstowski, who flew, he was a bombardier, he flew 65 missions during World War II. And then Joe Filippone next door, he was Italian, as his name sounds, and he was captured in Italy. And they were hiding him in the attic, and then they got scared, and they turned him over to the Germans, and he went to a prisoner of war camp for a time. And he came home, and I remember he brought home what was, and his parents lived next door to us. The mother never spoke English. The father spoke broken English, but the mother never spoke English. And then when he came home, he adopted me like a son, or a brother, because he wasn't that. He was older, but quite a bit older, like my brothers. And he'd take me. He went to Farmerdale Agricultural School, and he'd take me to his baseball games and this and that. And I'd go to his girlfriend's house with him and stuff, and I'd watch TV and stuff like that. So it was that's how the neighborhood was.
Yeah, you didn't hang out exactly with mom and dad because they were working so hard.
Yeah, I really didn't. As a kid, I was out of the house.
Sounds like it.
As I was once I went to school, I was literally on my own. Not neglectful way, but you take care of yourself.
Yeah. None of this babysitting stuff.
No.
Yeah.
And you didn't have to worry because as where you lived, everybody, that's not a problem. Everybody knew you and watched out for you.
Yeah.
So it was no problem.
Yeah.
They all knew you.
Yeah.
Everybody you go down the street, they say, oh, no. Everybody knew you.
So it took a village back then, is how
Oh,
things were
yeah,
like that.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So tell me a little bit. We're probably got another just 10, 15 minutes we're
Yeah.
gonna do today.
Yeah, because you got your ball game at 12.
Yeah, and I got mom.
Yep.
But I have a long list, so I just want to finish up a little bit with this childhood era, and that's schooling. So you went to parochial school
St.
from early on, or did you
St.
start?
Peter's parochial school.
Okay.
I didn't go to kindergarten. I went into first grade.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Do you know why that was?
I don't know. Maybe my mother wanted to keep me home.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah,
But I
that's
didn't-
sweet.
I-
That's
I
what I'm thinking.
I didn't go to kindergarten. I went to first grade.
Hmm.
And I got a case of whooping cough, which was bad in those days.
In the first grade.
Oh no, what they did is I got a needle for it and I subsequently got a bad cold forever.
You mean a needle of vaccination?
Yeah, and then I didn't get whooping cough, I shouldn't say that. But then after that I had colds a lot.
Ah.
So my mother would say that's because of the So that was and that was grammar school, and as I said, I served.
Who were you taught by, nuns or brothers?
They
Or?
were taught by nuns, Immaculate Heart of Mary, which was the same that taught the girls at St. Mary's. And they were all over the island. They were pretty predominant
Mm-hmm.
order. And I, yeah, grammar school, you know, I see how we get to say mass, not every day, but quite a bit, because I'd be there.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and then you go to school from 9 to 3.
Mm-hmm.
You come home, it was like literally almost 4 o'clock-ish.
Yep.
And you did things or whatever. In the wintertime, you stayed indoors pretty much.
Yeah.
But you could play in the wintertime there because it wasn't a really bad winter.
No. Okay.
No, because you're on water and stuff like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you think there's anything from, I mean, there's probably a million things, but is there anything from your childhood, like before you go to college, that you feel like I didn't ask about, or that you would want your grandkids to know, or you would want me
By
to
the way, I keep
remember?
doing this because that's my mother and you have the same trait.
I know.
And
And Wade does now.
And Kevin has it. And I can remember. My mother did that all the time.
Wade too. That's neat.
Oh, I'm sure there's probably stuff I could bring up, but it was a very well-protected childhood, especially grammar school. You know, it was everything was close, and you were in the community. You know, it's not like here. You know, you're literally
Spread
away
out.
from everything. You know,
Mhm.
there everything is there, and you know anybody and everybody in the community. I mean, there was no question about that. You knew. And
So it had a village feel or a city feel, or
oh,
which?
village.
Village.
Yeah, very, and but sophisticated because the people who own the estates, and then the people who work for them were pretty sophisticated. Like my parents, okay, didn't have an education, but they're pretty sophisticated. You know, they came all the way from Ireland, you know, really in
Mm-hmm.
the woods, so to speak.
Yeah.
And they come to America, and they make it,
Yes.
and so.
I've never heard, for example, that they rented a house at the same time they owned a smaller
No,
one.
they always lived.
No, I mean that they rented out one house while they owned a separate.
Yeah, it was
Like,
built the second house they owned, which is the house you know. That was built brand new, and so they had this other house, and so they rented that out. So you know these people were doing okay. See,
And that's sophisticated to understand. Like,
see, they were doing very well, and then the recession came. You know.
the Great Depression.
Yeah, the depression rather came. You know, because the times in the 20s were excellent, and so they were able to do those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm. How do you think they came through the Depression? I mean, was
You know,
life a lot harder?
No, because I think my father was fortunate. He probably was not out of work that much, and I really don't know because I was young. I was born in 37. But then see, my sisters started work early in the 40s, 41, 42. So
And was it expected they'd give some money?
Oh, yeah. You know, they all helped. Like I did when I was working in St. Mary's, I paid every month.
Really?
I gave them money to take care of.
After college?
Yep.
To keep you living there and to buy food and everything?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and so yeah, I think that would pretty well cover it.
Okay. Well, I'm thinking that's like 50 minutes. Do you want to do another segment on college, or should we just start the next time from
Next
there?
time.
That's what I think.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Dad.
You're welcome.
I'm so happy.
It worked well. Are you warm up?